Welcome to a place where silence speaks louder than words, where a single glance can awaken a soul that thought it had forgotten how to feel. Here, love is not neat or simple, it's raw, it's forbidden. It's the kind of connection that shakes the heart and leaves it trembling. This is where hidden desire grows stronger with every unspoken moment, where boundaries collapse in the dark, and where two souls learn to speak through touch instead of words. And even when the world cannot know, the story doesn't die, it lives forever in secret, carved into memory, eternal and unbreakable. These are not just stories. They are awakenings, confessions, truths too deep to remain silent. If you've ever felt a love that terrified you as much as it consumed you, you are in the right place. It happened in silence, in a moment so ordinary, it almost slipped by unnoticed, yet it carved itself into memory with a force impossible to ignore. The house was full that day, laughter and voices mingling in the air, the kind of background noise that usually drowns out everything else. But then the eyes met, just a glance, no words, nothing deliberate. And yet it felt as though the entire room had disappeared, leaving only that quiet pull between two souls who should have remained strangers to such a truth. The gaze lingered longer than it should have, not out of carelessness, but because something inside refused to let it end. It wasn't the look of curiosity or politeness. It was deeper, heavier, carrying a recognition that had no explanation. In those few seconds, everything else dissolved, years of living in routine, years of being unseen, years of forgetting that a heart could still tremble. That glance woke something thought to be buried, a stirring of warmth, a sudden rush of blood that made the air feel sharper and the body lighter, as if caught between fear and longing. There was no conversation, no need for one. The silence said more than words ever could. Eyes locked and searched, both cautious and daring at once, as though asking a question neither could speak aloud. Do you feel it too? The answer wasn't given in speech, but in the way time slowed, in the way the chest tightened, in the way the world outside that gaze felt unimportant. Every moment after that first look felt different. The sound of his laughter from across the room carried in a way no other sound did. The way he moved, casual and unaware of the storm he had already stirred, became impossible not to notice. Every detail sharpened the shape of his hands, the quiet confidence in the way he carried himself, the softness in his eyes when they drifted back in that direction. It felt dangerous to notice, yet impossible not to. There was a part that wanted to brush it off, to call it imagination, to bury the feeling before it grew. But there was also a part that had been waiting, quietly aching, for something to remind what it felt like to be alive in this way. That part whispered louder than the voice of reason, drowning out all attempts to dismiss what was happening. Desire didn't ask permission. It arrived suddenly, and with it came an ache so raw it was almost frightening. The following days made the silence louder. Even without words, the air between them shifted whenever paths crossed. A glance stolen across a table, the faintest brush of hands while passing something, the warmth of presence felt even before the eyes met, all of it built into a language without sound, one that said more than sentences ever could. Every encounter was innocent on the surface, but beneath it ran a current that neither could control. It wasn't just attraction, it was recognition. The kind that makes the heart pound with the sense of finally being seen, as if someone had looked past every layer and found the soul waiting underneath. That single moment had awakened something that could not be undone, a hunger not only of the body but of the heart. The silence became intoxicating, a secret both shared without ever speaking it aloud. There was fear too, fear of what it meant, fear of what would happen if it was acknowledged, fear of stepping into a place from which there would be no return. And yet, alongside the fear was a longing so fierce it eclipsed caution. Every stolen glance became a secret touch. Every moment of eye contact and embrace neither dared to make real, not yet. It was in the silence that the truest intimacy grew, building a fire without a single spark ever shone. That night, long after the house had quieted, the moment replayed again and again in memory. The way those eyes had held, the way the air had shifted, the way it felt like something forbidden yet destined. It was impossible to sleep, impossible to silence the heartbeat that had awakened after lying dormant for so long. What began as one glance had turned into a craving, an unshakable truth. Once awakened, desire does not return to sleep. And so it began, not with words, not with declarations, but with silence, the kind of silence that binds, that speaks louder than anything else, that marks the beginning of a story that could never again be undone. It started the moment eyes met in silence. It began as a quiet ache, the kind that hides beneath the surface of ordinary moments. At first, it was just a glance too long, a smile that lingered longer than it should, an awareness that burned softly, refusing to fade. It was subtle, almost innocent, but it carried a weight that pressed deeper with every passing day. The air shifted whenever he was near, thick with something unspoken, something both terrifying and impossible to resist. Every time eyes met, the pull grew stronger. It wasn't curiosity anymore, it was hunger, a hunger not just for touch, but for connection, for something that went beyond what words could capture. Each look carried a question neither dared to ask, but both already answered in silence. It was as though the body betrayed itself, leaning unconsciously closer, heart pounding harder, lips parting without a sound, searching for something they weren't supposed to want. The smallest things became unbearable. Sitting too close, the warmth of his arm brushing past, the faintest brush of skin when reaching for the same object each moment seared into memory, replaying long after it ended. A hand grazing another's fingers felt more intimate than any confession, more dangerous than any spoken admission. That brush of closeness left the skin tingling, the breath caught in the chest, the body trembling for more. Desire grew in the silence, fed not by what was done, but by what wasn't. The restraint became its own form of intimacy, each unspoken word wrapping tighter around the heart. The eyes spoke the truth the lips refused to confess longing, urgency, the ache of wanting what could not be named. It wasn't about chance or accident anymore. It was destiny taking form, slow and steady, weaving two lives together in ways that could not be undone. Nights grew longer, restless, haunted by memories of his nearness. The mind tried to fight it, but the body betrayed the battle. Lying in the dark, the warmth of his presence remained, as if he was still there, as if his breath was still brushing against the skin. It was terrifying how much one touch, one glance, one moment of closeness could consume everything else. The world outside began to blur, becoming irrelevant compared to the fire burning within. Every encounter deepened it. A smile that wasn't meant for anyone else, a laugh that carried across the room but landed directly on the heart. Even silence between them felt louder than conversation with anyone else. It was more than attraction, it was recognition, a sense of finding something that had been missing for too long. Each second near him was both torture and salvation, pulling closer to the edge while begging for more. The danger of it only made it stronger. The knowledge that it wasn't supposed to happen, that it shouldn't exist, only sharpened the need. Forbidden desire has a way of sinking deeper, of embedding itself so firmly that it becomes impossible to remove. The more it was denied, the more it burned. Resistance felt like drowning, suffocation in plain air, while giving in promised breath, fire, and freedom. Every accidental touch became deliberate in memory. The sound of his voice lingered long after he stopped speaking. The way he looked, steady and unflinching, cut through every layer built to protect against being seen. With him, there was no hiding. He looked, and it was as though the soul was stripped bare, exposed, trembling, yet craving to be touched in ways beyond the physical. Desire was no longer something to fear. It had become a truth that couldn't be denied. A force bigger than reason, bigger than morality, bigger than the carefully built walls of years gone by. It grew wild, unstoppable, demanding to be acknowledged. Each moment became unbearable not because it was wrong, but because it was unfinished, incomplete. And so the silence carried it, the closeness fed it, the unspoken words defined it. What began as a glance had become a storm. What started as a whisper had become a roar. Desire had grown into something both terrifying and irresistible, something that refused to be hidden forever. The pull could no longer be ignored. It happened on a night when silence felt heavier than words, when the distance that had been carefully kept began to crumble under the weight of what had been building for so long. The air was different, thick with unspoken truths, carrying a tension that no longer hid itself behind stolen glances or accidental touches. Every breath felt louder, every heartbeat stronger, as if the body already knew what the mind was still afraid to admit. There was no plan, no moment prepared. It began slowly, almost innocently, like a conversation that slipped into something deeper without either noticing when it crossed the line. A shoulder brushed too close. A hand lingered too long. The quiet stretched between them, and instead of pushing it away, it pulled tighter, drawing them closer until there was no space left to pretend. The first touch was hesitant, trembling, almost questioning. Fingers brushed against skin, as if asking permission, as if testing the truth of what had been silently burning all this time. The answer was in the way the body leaned in the way breath caught and eyes closed, surrendering before a word was spoken. That single touch ignited everything that had been restrained, and the walls built by caution collapsed in an instant. The closeness became overwhelming, no longer hidden beneath silence, but breaking free with a force that could not be stopped. Lips found lips with urgency, not gentle but desperate, the kind of kiss that carries years of longing, unspoken need, and the ache of desire denied too long. It was raw, unpracticed, hungry, yet tender in its truth. Passion erupted not because it was expected, but because it had been waiting, aching for this exact moment to arrive. The body spoke louder than words ever could. Hands explored with reverence and hunger, memorizing every curve, every line, every shiver that ran through skin. Each touch felt like confession, every breath a vow, every gasp a truth too heavy to hold back. It wasn't simply passion, it was the body screaming what the heart had been whispering in silence for so long. I want you. I need you. I can't deny this any longer. Time lost meaning. The night stretched endlessly, and within that space nothing else mattered, not the world outside, not the consequences, not the fear that once held everything back. What mattered was the closeness, the undeniable fire of two bodies finally giving in to what they had always known. It was liberation and surrender at once, terrifying and intoxicating. Every boundary that once kept them apart was gone. The restraint that had been their shield turned to dust, leaving only truth. And in that truth there was no shame, no guilt, only the undeniable recognition of something too deep to be ignored. The touch was no longer accidental, the closeness no longer forbidden, it was chosen, claimed, embraced with the full weight of their hearts. The night became a blur of passion and tenderness, of urgency and stillness, of two souls learning each other through the language of touch. Nothing had to be said, because every kiss, every caress, every trembling sigh spoke louder than words. It was not about escape, nor about rebellion. It was about finally being seen, finally being wanted, finally being alive again in the arms of someone who understood without needing to be told. When morning threatened to break, there was no regret in the air, only the quiet aftermath of something too powerful to undo. The world outside would return, Reality would demand its due, but nothing could erase what had been shared in that night. Boundaries had been crossed, and with it came a new truth, one that could no longer be hidden in silence. That night, closeness became touch, and touch became everything. It became something too fragile for the world to see, something that could only survive in shadows, where glances turned into confessions and touches became promises. The love that grew between us wasn't written in declarations or shared with anyone else. It was carved into secret moments, hidden away from every eye but ours. It was a fire we carried in silence, a truth that could never be spoken aloud, yet it burned deeper than anything ever known. Each time paths crossed, it was as if the universe itself conspired to remind us of what we carried. A brush of fingers when handing something over, a pause too long when eyes met across a crowded room, the electric pull of two souls tethered together but forced to remain apart, every detail etched itself into memory. Those moments lived longer than they lasted, replaying endlessly in the quiet of night, filling the heart with both ache and joy. There was no need for words. Words would have betrayed us, exposed what was too precious to reveal. Instead, the silence spoke louder. A glance that lingered said, "I see you." A fleeting smile carried the weight of "I miss you." The warmth of a hand resting a moment too long whispered, "I need you." That secret language became the only way to survive a love that had no place in daylight. Desire never dimmed. It only grew heavier, sharper, more impossible to resist. Every stolen moment was a lifeline, a way to breathe when the rest of the world suffocated. It was dangerous, terrifying even, but it was also the only thing that felt real. And so, the fire was carried carefully, hidden beneath layers of routine and normalcy, but always there, always burning. Nights alone were the hardest. In the quiet, memories of stolen closeness came alive, filling the skin with ghostly warmth, the mind with the sound of breath, the heart with the weight of being held in ways the world could never know. The loneliness was sharp, but so was the sweetness of remembering. The way lips had once pressed with urgency, the way bodies had once spoken when words dared not. Those memories became treasures, both painful and precious, reminders of what could never be claimed, yet could never be erased. Every time the world tried to pull us back into distance, the pull between us only grew stronger. It wasn't just passion, though passion burned hotter than anything else. It was recognition, the kind of knowing that no matter how much time passed or how far apart we were forced to stand, the bond would remain. It lived outside of rules, outside of expectations, outside of reason itself. It was something eternal, something carved not into paper or stone, but into flesh and soul. Even in moments of silence, when nothing was exchanged, when space stretched wide between us, the connection throbbed like a heartbeat. It was always there, a constant presence, a secret companion. Others might have seen nothing more than casual encounters, polite words, or familiar gestures, but beneath it lived an entire world, a love story hidden in plain sight, invisible to everyone but the two who carried it. The secrecy became part of its power, the knowledge that it was only ours, untouchable, unseen, kept it sacred. To share it would have been to weaken it, to expose it to judgment, to let others try to cage what was never meant to be caged. So it was guarded fiercely, protected in shadows, held close like a forbidden jewel. There was pain in it, yes, the ache of wanting more, the constant pull against the boundaries that life demanded, the endless hunger for time that would never belong to us. But there was beauty in it too, beauty in the stolen glances that felt like eternity, beauty in the secret smiles that lit up the darkest days, beauty in the knowledge that some connections don't need a lifetime to prove themselves. They are eternal from the moment they are born. The world may never know, but the soul does, and the body remembers, the eyes remember, the heart carries it always, beating with the rhythm of a love that cannot be erased, hidden, yes, forbidden, perhaps, but eternal without question. Some loves live in shadows, and yet they shine brighter than anything the light could ever hold. If this story touched something inside you, don't let it end here. There are more stories of desire, of silence, of love so powerful it cannot be hidden forever. Subscribe, share, and keep walking with me through the shadows where passion, truth, and eternal secrets live. Until next time, stay, listen, and never forget the power of a love that refuses to be silenced.